The orca whales that live in the Salish Sea near the San Juan Islands appear at first glance to be perfectly healthy. In reality, they're battling for their lives because they face 4 major threats.
The salmon population in the last 50 years has decreased 95%, which is huge when you live on salmon, 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 and salmon. So the whales are having to work a lot harder to find fish, and there's times when they're having to draw down on their blubber, and the blubber is where the PCBs and all the toxins are being stored, so they're releasing that into their system when they draw down.
These orca whales are very picky eaters. They're similar to a little kid that will only eat macaroni and cheese. These whales, they love their salmon, but not only salmon, Chinook salmon, and particularly Chinook salmon that come from the Fraser River. So it's an extremely difficult idea for them to just suddenly switch their diet. It would probably take years for that to happen because, again, they've been hunting the salmon for probably thousands of years now. To suddenly make a change, that would be a big deal.
Although PCBs were banned in the United States since the 1970s, they're still heavily used in Asian countries as industrial lubricants. They're being dumped in the ocean as industrial waste and travel along the ocean floor, ultimately being stored into whales' fat reserves.
Well, PCBs are polychlorinated biphenyls, and basically they were used in electrical transformers for a long time as a lubricant. Well, over the years we discovered that PCBs were a very toxic substance for the environment. Particularly with these animals, it's inhibiting their reproductive system as well as their immune system. When they eat the salmon, that's where they're getting the PCBs. The PCBs fall into the ocean and the precipitation, work their way up the food chain, becoming more and more concentrated, and the bigger the animal. So of course by the time they get into the orcas, they're very concentrated.
It's terrible what's happening in our oceans. You probably know that when these orcas die, their bodies are so contaminated that they're actually categorized as hazardous waste. This is stuff that we humans have done to them. This has not been something that's just happening naturally. You know, I think we humans have to do better. We have to make smarter choices because the fact is, many of these changes aren't going to be reversible. You know, if these sort of pollutants continue to get into our waterways and into our food stream, there are cases where very recently, for example, scientists have discovered appallingly high levels of heavy metals in sperm whales, which are at the top of the food chain. They eat squid and shark, and they all eat smaller creatures going downward, and same with the southern residents eating the salmon. So these levels of toxins are extremely concentrated in the organs of these mammals, and we have to do better.
On average, male orcas live to be 40 to 50 years old, while females live to be 60 to 80. However, when living in captivity in places such as the Miami Sea Aquarium, their lifespan is at least cut in half.
Between 1965 and 76, we lost 49 whales to the captures for all the marine parks. Of the 49 whales, only one is still alive. Her name is Lolita. She was captured in 1970. She was 4 years old. She's been performing for 40 years now. She's about 22 feet long, and she's living in a tank that's only 19 feet deep. So if she were to put her nose on the bottom, 3 feet of her tail is going to be sticking up out of the water. So it's a very bad case. Lolita still makes LPOD calls. She is a member of LPOD, so she just still keeps up the dialect, and it is our hope that if we can somehow get her released, that we can, if nothing else, put her in a net pen in a big bay where she can live in deep, cold water and eat real salmon, and maybe if LPOD were to swim by, she could communicate with them, and who knows, maybe even reintegrate with them, which would be our ultimate goal. Another concern that we have is the effects of vessel noise on whales. Whales live in an acoustic world, and they communicate with each other through squeaks and whistles, and also through echolocation clicks to hunt for fish. And just like when you guys are at a party, the louder it gets, you tend to talk slower, enunciate more, and talk a little louder. The whales do the exact same thing. And of course, when we're with whales, that's why we slow down to 7 knots, keep our engine noise down as much as we can. Whereas we can be right with whales and have a tanker 4 or 5 miles away, and he'll drown us all out because he's so loud. There is the concern, especially as private boaters come on, they don't know the whale watch guidelines and rules. They see a whale, they're like, whale, go get it. And they're right on top of whales. and they do disturb the whales, and they just don't know better a lot of times, or they don't care. But there's also a positive side. As people go out on whale watch boats, they become more aware of the problems facing the whales through when we educate on the boat. That they become, instead of just becoming passengers and tourists, they become advocates of the whales. Small things that you can do to help whales. For example, we only have so much fresh water in the world, so conserving your water at home, not using fertilizer in your yards and gardens, because that fertilizer all eventually ends up in the ocean.
Using detergents and dish soaps that are environmentally friendly. Those are just little things you can do at home to help these animals out. I know it doesn't seem like it would make a huge difference, but it does. And then, educate the people around you about the whales. It's not even necessarily, using one product over another. Just telling people about how amazing these animals are will help them to maybe do things at home that are, using green practices. Also, you can give up eating seafood. Leave it for the animals, which is actually one choice that I've made. I've decided not to eat salmon anymore because salmon stocks are down 90% in this area, and I'd rather the orcas have them. I can go to the grocery store and eat anything that's there, and they can't.
Everything we as humans do on this planet, whether we like it or not, has effects. So many of us live in sort of insulated worlds where we throw things away, or we buy a certain product or a certain kind of plastic, and we use it once or twice and it gets chucked. And even these convenient water bottles, plastic water bottles that are, let's face it, they're really convenient to have, or plastic shopping bags. It's really easy to go to the store and chuck everything in a plastic bag. Well, a dead gray whale was discovered to have 22 plastic shopping bags in his belly. That sort of stuff, those are things that we can change. There are certain industrial processes maybe that we as individuals can't change, but we can all educate ourselves to make smarter choices, because we are having an impact on the environment. And these amazing creatures that didn't ask to be eating polluted fish, or inhaling plastic shopping bags that sink to the bottom of the ocean floor. And, for example, with the gray whales, they scoop up mud from the bottom of the floor, and they get this stuff. They're not choosing, we can make better choices to choose healthier foods. They can't. This is all they've got.
We are big on promoting people's awareness of the whales. A bunch of us have formed an association called the Sailor Sea Association of Marine Naturalists, and basically our goals are to preserve and educate. Education is the biggest thing that we can do to help promote a more healthy ecosystem out here. For example, farm salmon. People thought, I'll buy farm salmon so that the wild salmon can survive. And on paper it looks like a great idea, but in real life it's a disaster. They put all the salmon farms right in prime wild salmon spawning areas. When wild salmon swim by these big farms, they pick up a lot of disease from these farm salmon that are not native here. Farm salmon is full of growth hormone, antibiotics, and instead of being a lovely pink shade like wild salmon, is gray, so they inject it full of food dye. So farm salmon is just a nightmare.
We can use less, we can recycle more. These simple things that many people in your generation are starting to do. So I'll pass the baton on to you guys to help us all make better choices.